like a lot of pressure on me to not break the glass. I hope no one's had a taste of this water because I'm very thirsty now. Super. Um, like, I want to share this morning what I feel God has for the church and what He has for us for 2025. And so 2 weeks ago, I had this word from the Lord, and I feel like the Lord is saying that He has a portion that He has set aside for us that's never been seen before. It's something exciting and something new and something amazing that He's about to pour out upon us. And He's kept it for this time and this year. And I kind of came to this conclusion after reading the Bible. Because I like to read through the Bible in a year. I try every year because I used to do a Bible study with Miriam, and we had to read through the Bible plan, and we'd read and just write to what God was showing us in that passage. And it was amazing. So since that time, I tried every year to read through it. And I used to follow the plan, but I lost that and then decided, no, it will work better if I just sort of start in January in Genesis and then work my way through, and hopefully in December we'll get to Revelation. So if on a day where I had lots of time on the weekend, I had lots of time for reading, I would read many chapters. But when life got a little bit busy and it's like in the middle of the week, I would just read a little bit. And that worked for a long time, but last year we came to December, and it was very apparent that I was not going to make it through because there was still a lot of chapters left, because it appeared that I have had a lot of busy days that prevented me from reading the Bible, which is not a good thing. Now, I do know that we have to read the Bible because it's relational with the Lord. We don't read it because it's religion or you have to, because you can read the whole Bible in one sitting, but if you don't get something out of it that feeds your spirit, what's the point? Like the Pharisees, they knew the scriptures through and through, but there was no life in it for them. So it's better to read one verse and get life from it than to read everything. But then it's also important to read the whole Bible in its entire thing. So I was struggling last year, not getting through. And then I was wasting some time on YouTube, as one does when you're bored. And I got to this testimony of a guy from Africa. And so I'm from South Africa, and so it was just so nice what he was saying. Everything he was talking about was so familiar. And he was born, and from his birth, he was like dedicated to a witch doctor. And so all those kind of things really made a lot of sense for me, because I remember as a little girl walking to the supermarket, there would be people on the side of the road who had shops that sold little things, and you could walk past the witch doctor's little stall, and he would have his potions and bones and all sorts of things kind of on the mat. And so I was intrigued by what he was saying because I had a reference for it. And he grew up in that and just did everything that was wrong, everything you can imagine that is evil, that he did. But the Lord saved him miraculously. It was like a huge miracle that he came to the knowledge of Jesus, and he changed his life. And things went well for a while, but then he got sick. He got cancer. And he went to the hospital, and he was really sick, like as sick as you can get with it. And every day, God sent a lady to come and read the Bible to him. And God told her to read 25 chapters to him every day. Now, he couldn't get off his bed because he was so sick. He couldn't see because the medicine did stuff to his eyesight, and he couldn't walk. And he was in extreme pain. But when she stood in the hallway, she's not allowed in his room because he's too sick, and she read the Bible to him, was the only time he wasn't in pain. So every day she came, 25 chapters. And here I was kind of struggling to get through the Bible in 1 year. But the doctors sent him home because he was not going to survive. There was nothing more they could do. It was just go home and die, basically. And he had an encounter with Jesus, and he healed him supernaturally. And because he was so thankful for what God has done for him, that every day since that time, and that was like 10, 15 years ago, he reads 25 chapters every day. Not because of religion, not because of this is what you have to do, but because of thankfulness and building his relationship with the one who saved him from all of that stuff. So I Googled, how much do you have to read of the Bible to get through it in a year? And you only need to read about 3 to 4 chapters a day, because it's the decimal point type thing if you put it in. There's only 1,189 chapters. If you read 4 of them every day, you'll get through it. And so I felt like a little bit convicted. Here's someone who can read 25 chapters a day, but I can't even get through 3 or 4 a day. And why is that? And the Lord said to me, it's because you're not disciplined. You let other stuff sort of come in before what is important. As an Olympic athlete, they are very disciplined because they have the gold medal in front of them as their prize. So that is their focus. That's all they do. They get up at 4 in the morning and go for a run. They are on special diets and they devote their life to that one goal. So if Jesus is my goal, how am I disciplining myself that I could run the race to obtain the most important prize? So I decided this year I need to make a change. I have to become more disciplined so that I have what is most important to me as the first thing in my life, not the last thing. Because on a busy day, why is it that my relationship with God suffers? Why is it not something else? Why can't we just have baked beans on toast? Or why can't I say no to somebody for wanting to come over, or whatever the case? Why is it the Bible? So become disciplined. So in my new discipline regime, it's only been 26 days, and it's going well so far. I'm not sure how long it takes to set a habit. Can you remember, Ian, how long before people give up on their... Oh, past 40 days. All right, I'm not there, but I'm hopefully going to make it. So I'm not reading 25 chapters a day, if anybody is wondering about that, but I did come up with a better plan. So 2 weeks ago, I read 2 Bible stories in my new reading program that said the same thing. And so I thought that's no coincidence that God would say something in the New Testament and in the Old Testament on the same day. And what he was saying was he kept back a portion for a specific time and for a specific people for a specific purpose. And I felt God say he has a portion for his church for this time that he has kept and set apart for us for now. And it's a really good portion. So our first story is from John chapter 2, where Jesus goes to a wedding. And so on the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. So Jewish weddings looked a little bit different to the way we do it in today's world. We decide who we want to marry. But back in the biblical days, it was the father of the son who decided. He went and he chose a bride for his son. And then the son and the father would go to the bride's father and they would say, "Can my son marry your daughter?" And they would agree upon a bride price. They would pay that. And the father of the son would pour a cup of wine and he would give it to his son. And his son would take a drink and he would then give it to his new bride. And if she accepts it, she is saying, "Yes, I will marry you." And then she takes a sip and they enter into a covenant with each other that is binding like a marriage. So that's pregnant with Jesus in that betrothal sort of a time. And it was a serious commitment. You didn't decide, "Oh, well, I made a mistake saying yes," or "things aren't working out." You were legally now binded to that person, and only the husband could break off that agreement with the girl. And so the boy and the father would leave the bride living with her father, and they would go to the son's father's house, where he builds a little room for him and his new bride, and he prepares a place for her. And in the meantime, the bride is getting herself ready for married life. But no one knows when the bridegroom is going to go and get his new bride. That's determined by the father of the son. He sort of one day wakes up and goes, okay, it's time, go and get her. And that's when he just jumps up and he goes, and someone goes before him and proclaims, make ready, the bridegroom is coming. And that's when the bride will put on a dress and she will be expecting him to come. She doesn't know. He could come any time, day or night. And then they would have another ceremony where they would sort of do the marriage part. And then the bride and the groom would enter the bridal chamber. And let's just say he comes out with a smile on his face. And then they have a party for 7 days. They have a banquet, the wedding banquet. And so this is where this wedding is at, where Jesus is at. They're at the wedding banquet stage. And for 7 days, you feed. It must have cost like an arm and a leg. We think weddings are hard work today, but imagine 7 days being feeding the whole village, because most of the time everybody came that was living in the village. So now both Jesus and his disciples, I already said that. Right, and when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Jesus said to her, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Now that sounds kind of very rude in English when he says to her, woman, but it was actually in the Hebrew a very honorable way of addressing somebody. And when he says, my hour has not yet come, he's referring to his death on the cross. So his mother says to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. Now there were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. So I did some hair splitting here with this. How much is 20 or 30 gallons apiece? Because in my human brain, if I can understand how many liters of wine that was and how much it would cost in today's kind of value, I would feel I could make sense of the supernatural, which is like a silly thing to want to do, but it's in our nature, isn't it, to kind of figure out God's plans and figure out his purposes and how he works. But I remember years ago reading about creation. It's like, how did God create the world? How did he do it? And did it take him 7 days, like night and day, or was it 7 time periods? Or there's quite a lot of questions around creation. But then I read something that said it's not about the how of creation, it's about the who of creation. And if we have the who of creation in front of us, then all the other things doesn't matter. And it's the same with this kind of how much wine. It's not about the how, it's about the who. But it still bothered me. And so I spent a lot of time brainstorming with Hannes how many gallons this was and how does it equate to liters, because I don't know how much a gallon is. I grew up in the liters and milliliters time. So also the oldest English Bible doesn't say it's gallons. They say it's firkins. So there's 2 or 3 firkins containing into each pot of stone. And then it seemed like different versions of the Bible, they couldn't agree over how much that would be in gallons, because if you read different translations, they say different things. So it's very difficult to put what they did in the Bible's times and how they measured into today's kind of what's familiar to us. Because I remember my dad, he grew up in the time when they talked about thumbs and hands and feet. So when Dad talked about measuring something, he would say it was that many feet. And we would just look at him as like, Dad, what planet are you on? Are you talking about my feet or your feet? Because his feet was remarkably much more bigger than mine. And then he talked about it rained 6 thumb or 3 thumb or something last night. And we're just like, yeah. So I think that's the same with how they measured in the Bible. It just doesn't equate to us in and what we know. And even the different, this is going to tell you how boring I am. For Christmas, I wanted Josephus Complete Works. So how many of you know who Josephus was? There's more boring people here than... Yeah, and Greg has got his works too. So even Josephus wasn't helpful. I tried to kind of work out how many firkins equates to a gallon. So even the experts had trouble. But yet again, it's not about the how much, it's about the who of the miracle. But kind of, with all that information, I would say about 600 liters is what we are kind of talking about. And so I try to work out how much would 600 liters of good wine cost. Because we know that, oh, Heather is just laughing. We know that this was the best wine that they ever tasted. The wine Jesus made was better than anything before. So we're talking top-notch stuff. So I tried Googling what does good wine cost, because I have no idea. I have no desire to drink wine at all. Because once you've been set free from something, how can you go back to that thing? Because when Paul says, do not be drunk with wine, it will ruin your life. I know what a ruined life looked like from drunkenness. I was born into it. Like I didn't choose it, it just kind of happened. And I lived the pain of that for 33 years. And one day, I came to church. I could tell you a lot of hair-raising stories of how I grew up and what happened and what I saw, but it won't be honoring to anyone or helpful. It's not going to bring life. But if you could do like a mental picture, because I'm a picture person, if I can see something in a picture, it makes sense to me. But it was like if you put a bowl of maggots in front of someone and say, here, this is your portion. You eat from that. That is what drunkenness brings, and the pain that's associated with that. And so one day, I came to church, and I spent a good amount of time on the ground, just somewhere over there. It felt like only about a minute, but it was much longer, because I went down when the church was full, and I got up, and there was no one left. Not even my own family. They abandoned me and went home. But Jesus took all of that pain and all of that shame and the disgust and the regret and the hatred and everything that came with just too much wine. And I got up and I was a new person. And I had a revelation of like what he did on the cross. Because I know what the maggots tasted like. I was familiar with that. But he took that on the cross for me and for you. And so that, I think, has been a defining moment in my life that Jesus did on the cross. So I can't go back to the maggots now that I've tasted the freedom. That's why I have no desire for drinking anything or even knowing what it would cost. So it was a lost cause of impossibility. Couldn't work it out. But it doesn't matter, because it's not about how he did it. It's about who he was and who he is. So Jesus says to the servants, fill these water pots with water. And they filled them to the brim. And he said to them, draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast. And they took it. Now, up to this point, there's no indication that the water has turned to wine. So we don't know, when did it happen? But imagine if you were the servant and you have put the water into that pot and Jesus says, draw it out and take it to the big boss. How would you feel? Would you do it? Would you just, hopefully it was wine by that time. But like in my own experience, I feel God has always waited with me until the last moment. So I can imagine that as those servants walked over with that cup, that's when it happened. And they took it. And the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. I quite like that. The master didn't know where it came from, but the servants knew. And this, I was thinking, if you cannot serve well, you cannot lead well. And no one wants to be a servant. Like, I don't like serving. That's not the funnest thing. No, we want to be kings where we are served and stuff come our way. But no, none of us want to serve. But if you can't serve well, you cannot lead well. And we see that with Elijah. He was an amazing prophet in the Old Testament, and the Bible has 16 recorded miracles of Elijah, including where he calls fire down from heaven to burn up a sacrifice. Amazing man. And he calls his servant Elisha. And Elisha serves him well. When it's time for Elijah to be taken to heaven, Elijah says to Elisha, all right, it's time for me to go. You go and do whatever. But Elisha's like, no, I will not leave you. And he sticks with Elijah to the very end. Elijah, because he served him well. And he receives a double portion of the spirit that was on Elijah. And we read about 32 recorded miracles that Elisha has done because he served well. Then Elisha calls his servant Gehazi, I think is how you pronounce his name. He does not serve his master well. He is greedy. He likes money. And he speaks things in Elisha's name that Elisha didn't say. So he could have, if he served well, he could have had a double portion of Elisha's mantle and did 64 recorded miracles, but he didn't. Instead, he got leprosy because he was greedy and he did not learn to serve well. So if you can't serve well, you are not going to lead well. And these servants, they served well. So they take the wine to the bridegroom or to the master of the feast. And when the master of the feast tastes the wine, he's impressed. And he calls over the bridegroom and he says to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. And when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now. See, Jesus kept the best wine back for a time when people ran out of wine. He could have had that wine at the beginning, but he didn't. He waited to serve that portion until they were desperate. And this beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and he manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So Jesus did this miracle to manifest his glory. So that was my first story that I read. And I thought, I quite like that. Then I read a story in the Old Testament from Samuel 1, Samuel 9. And so Sonia did a really great job of giving us a history lesson last week. So we'll pick up from where she left off. The nation of Israel, God promised them this beautiful land to live in, and they took possession of it and destroyed Jericho and some other cities, and they lived there. And for years, they had judges rule over them. But they weren't satisfied with that. They wanted a king, like all the other countries around them. So God said to Samuel, I will show you who you should anoint as king. And there was a man named Saul, and Saul's father's donkeys got lost, and Saul went looking for the donkeys, but they couldn't find the donkeys. So they thought, we'll go and see Samuel the prophet, because he will know where the donkeys are. So as Saul and his servant comes up to Samuel, God says to him, this is the one who I want to anoint king over my people. And Samuel invites him to a banquet. And when they get there, this is what Samuel says to the cook. They let him and his servant sit in the place of honor as well. And Samuel says to the cook, bring the portion which I gave you, of which I said to you, set it apart. So the cook took up the thigh with the upper part and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, here it is, what was kept back. It was set apart for you. Eat, for until this time it has been kept for you, since I said I invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. So Samuel had a portion for Saul that was set aside just for Saul. And Saul didn't do a very good job with his portion. He wasn't a good king. He was, again, disobedient. He didn't serve well like David. David served, and he was a man after God's own heart. because he served the Lord well. So I read these two stories, and the Lord said to me, I have a portion for my bride that I've kept apart for this time. And I believe that the Lord is about to pour it out on us just because of his goodness, not because we are deserving or we've done something amazing, but because he's a good God and he loves his bride so much that he went to the cross for her. So that all we need to do is receive what he has poured out upon us and live in thankfulness and partake in that portion. Let us not be like Saul, who was doubting in who God made him to be. But let's partake with thankfulness into what he has for us. So if the worship team would like to come back, we'll finish with a song. And if you're sick this morning, or if you just feel empty like those water pots that had nothing in them, and you just want the Lord to fill you up again, please come forward or find somebody around you who would love to pray with you. And if you'd like to stand, I just want to proclaim the Lord's portion over you, or declare the Lord's portion over you. Oh, proclaim. Oh, Greg wants it. He's like, yeah, declare. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for your bride. Thank you for your people. And Lord, thank you that you went to the cross for us. Thank you that you bought us with your blood. And so, Lord, I just proclaim over your bride this morning. I declare your goodness. I declare that you've invited your bride to your banqueting house, and that your banner over your bride is love. And the Lord is inviting you to his table. He's preparing a table for you in the presence of your enemies, where he's anointing your head with oil till your cup runs over. And may goodness and mercy follow you all the days of your life. And may you dwell in the house of the Lord forever.